Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to be presenting the CPA Evolution is Coming, Create a Plan to Pass Before It Changes today. My name is Julie Snow, and I'll be moderating today's event. We'd really love to hear from you and where you're patching in from, so please take a moment to tell us your first name and where you're located in the chat box. And while you're doing that, we also want to learn a little bit about where you are in your academic journey as well. So I am going to launch a question on screen. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment, this really helps our presenter to learn a little bit about who he's presenting today. Where are you in your academic journey? Are you an undergraduate freshman or sophomore? Are you a junior or senior? Maybe you're a graduate student, or maybe you graduated in the last year. If so, congratulations. Or maybe you graduated more than a year ago. Every now and then we get some mid-career professionals who graduated a long time ago, and we really love to have you participate in these webinars. I'm just going to give it a second to finish, to give as many of you as possible a chance to submit your answer. Okay, thank you for answering that question. Well, it looks like we have, oh wow, we have about 2/3 of our audience today graduated more than a year ago. And about a third of you are either in school or just recently graduated. So thanks again for taking a minute to tell us where you are. And again, if you can, tell us in the chat box where you're calling in from, and we'd love to hear from you. All right, next slide, please. Before we jump into the presentation, I just have a few quick announcements. First of all, everyone is in listen-only mode, so please submit your questions in the questions box, and we will take as many questions as we can during the presentation, but we've also reserved about 10 minutes at the end to address any remaining questions. You may download a copy of today's slides in the handout section. And also, this event is being recorded and will be emailed in 24 hours. So, you know, if you can't stay for the whole thing, look for that recording. Next slide, please. All right, I am delighted to introduce today's instructor. Dr. Holderness is an associate professor of accounting at West Virginia University. He teaches managerial and forensic accounting and works extensively with doctoral students conducting their research projects. He's also an instructor in the BEC section of the Wiley CPA review course, and he teaches extensively for the Wiley CMA review course. Welcome, Kip. I'm going to pass it over to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Julie. It is great to be here. Go Mountaineers. I'm at West Virginia University. You guys can see my coonskin cap here in the background. It's great to be here. I'm very excited to share with you some thoughts I have on the CPA Evolution and some things that I would do if I were in your shoes looking to get that CPA credential. So as Julie mentioned, anytime you have questions, please shoot them to us in the chat box. If we don't get to them during the presentation, we can certainly talk more after we're finished. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to chat about is what exactly is this CPA Evolution, right? This is a very unique project. It's the brainchild of the AICPA and NASBA, and they've come together to really just reimagine the entire CPA licensure model. This is a big deal. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the difference between a practice analysis and the CPA Evolution that we're in the process of going through right now. As you all know, the CPA exam changes regularly, and this makes sense because regulations are changing constantly. So it makes sense that the test needs to change to stay up to date. But these regular updates are called practice analyses, and they happen every 6 months, every year, like clockwork. And that's just changes in the test, slight changes to address new content. The CPA Evolution is not a practice analysis. This isn't a regular change. This is, it probably should be called the CPA Revolution. It's a big deal. Once the CPA Evolution is completely rolled out, we won't have an end of these practice analyses. These are still going to continue to happen as regulations and the practice of accounting changes. But the CPA Evolution is different because of the structure of the exam that's going to change. It's not just an update of content. We're now going to have new content areas. We're going to have new sub areas to reflect the change in the knowledge that CPAs are going to have going forward. And this is just a reflection also of the recent changes we've seen in the last few years. So the logical question, maybe like, why now? Why are they doing this right now? And I think it has a lot to do with just the business environment in general. We're in a period of rapid change. As accountants, we really need to keep up with the times to provide companies with the skill set that they need, and also to protect those who depend on financial information. I sometimes like to think of accountants as kind of defenders of the free markets, right? The public has to put their trust in financial statements and financial professionals, and we give assurance to the market. So this is a very important role, and if we don't keep up with practice, then we won't be fulfilling that role. And as an accounting professional, I want the CPA to mean something, right? Those 3 letters behind my name, I want them to stand for something beyond I studied for a long time. I want it to mean that I have the skills and the knowledge necessary to fulfill that crucial role that I have in the economy. So as the skills needed to do the job changes, the test needs to mirror the changes. Okay. Now, if we think back through history, right? Accounting's history can be traced back thousands of years to the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia. But accountants today are not the same as accountants were back then. We're not just keeping track of money and taxes and inventory. We're not just bookkeepers. We're not just recording transactions. We are analysts. We're decision makers. And we need to understand more deeply internal control systems and data analytics. And the menial tasks of tracking debits and credits today are largely carried out by software. And I wish that means that we wouldn't have to learn those for the CPA exam. We still have to know them. But there's a greater focus on how to use that information strategically and how to provide clients with the insights that they need to improve effectiveness and efficiency in their company. Accounting standards are changing in such a way that data analytics will be a necessary skill set going forward. I can tell you, I teach cost accounting right now at West Virginia University. We're getting toward the end of the semester, and we're counting down the days as professors, just like students are. There's a fair amount of math in my class, but I tell my students all the time that computers can do the math far better than they can do the math. And that's not why people are going to give them a job. They need to be able to do things that computers can't do. And that's the same with all of us who are studying for the CPA exam. It's not going to be enough for you to do the math. You're going to need to interpret what that data means, right? You got to interpret the analysis to help companies make good decisions. That's our role. So let's get into the specifics about how the test is going to change. Now, we're used to 4 exams, right? Audit, BEC, FAR, and Reg. And all candidates take the 4 same exams. Now, the new model is a core plus discipline licensure model. And what that means is that the model starts with a deep and strong core in accounting, auditing, and tax. Those are the 3 tests that everyone's going to take. And there's going to be technology that is integrated throughout all of those exams. And I want to point out that recently, this is kind of an older picture from the CPA Evolution, information that we all get as faculty, and you've probably seen some of this online. They're changing the name of accounting back too far. So it seems like the more things change, the more things stay the same. But you have these 3 core classes that everyone needs to take. Technology is going to be integrated throughout. And then you'll also need to choose a discipline in which to demonstrate deeper skills and knowledge. And this can be in one of 3 areas, either tax compliance and planning, business analysis and reporting, or information systems and controls. And these kind of line up to the 3 core disciplines, right? So tax, obviously, that if you're really good at tax, in addition to the 3 core exams, you're going to want to take the tax compliance and planning. If you're really strong in accounting or the forensic, I'm sorry, not forensic, but FAR, you're going to probably lean toward business analytics and reporting. The audit specialists are probably going to lean more towards the information systems and controls. It's not a perfect fit, but they're kind of put together that way. Regardless of which discipline you choose, you have to take 3 core exams, one of the disciplines, and no matter which one you choose, this model leads to a full CPA license with all the rights and privileges consistent with any other CPA. And what I mean by that is that all CPAs are going to be exactly the same. They're the same 3 letters at the end of your name, no matter which of the disciplines you choose. And there will be no way for anyone to know which one you chose. So bottom line, you're going to be a CPA as long as you take those 4 exams. You just have a little more choice than you did before. Now, CPAs have several advantages with the new format. So I know there's a lot of angst here, but I think this is a good thing. You're going to be more relevant because of your skill set. That skill set's going to match the need of practitioners. I think with this new format, the public's going to have increased trust in our output, in our work product. I think the introduction of technology into the test is very, very important. The CMA exam went through this recently where they added a data analytics section of the exam. And the CPA is following suit. CPA exam is following suit by integrating technology throughout the exam. Your ability to assess the reliability of and work with data will dramatically improve if you go through a program that trains you for the new exam. For instance, you'll know about cleaning data, using structured and unstructured data, the ethical and implications to using data. Once you have that data all set up and ready to go, you'll have a greater ability to use technology to analyze that data. And there's a lot of software programs out there. The one that the exam will focus on will be Excel. Excel is the software tested on the CPA exam. And you'll need to be able to use functions in Excel to help answer questions that will be posed to you on the exam. And that makes sense. I talk to alumni all the time. I was at a recruiting event last night. There's so many new software programs. The one that I hear more and more, or far more often than any other program, is our students really need to know Excel. So that's still kind of the king of the block. Finally, you'll be able to apply critical thinking and professional skepticism to interpret analyses. For example, you'll be able to answer questions about the reliability of the source of the data used in your analysis. You'll be able to answer the question as to whether the evidence corroborates management's assertions or whether it's off base. And I think this is what companies need right now. These new requirements are going to help future-proof the CPA exam because it can adapt to practice more quickly than in years past, right? If we have 4 standardized exams that don't change and something changes in practice, it's really hard to get things up and running differently. That's why the CPA Evolution has been a little painful. With this new structure, we can more quickly adapt to changes in the profession. All right, so I have a little history lesson for you. I would love to ask a question, and not a poll question, but you can put it in the chat box. How many of you are familiar with the term Luddite? Just a yes or no would be great.
Kip, I think maybe we only have, our attendees only have access to the questions box, so you can go ahead and pop your answer into the questions box. We're getting a mixture of about half yes, half no.
Okay, that's great. This is the kind of the nerdy professor in me. I love facts like these. I know a lot of useless facts. Glad to share them with people. All right, so if you knew what this one was, good for you. If you didn't, now you'll know. A Luddite is a person opposed to new technology or new ways of working. All right, question 2. If you knew that one, great. How many of you know the history of the term Luddite? Give you just a minute to enter that in.
We're getting some, Robert says, yes, Planet Money. maybe the podcast, heard it on the podcast, but we got a couple of vaguelys and a mixture of yeses and nos. More nos than yeses.
Good, I'll teach you something. You're gonna come away with something from today's lecture. So the Luddites were a secret oath-based organization of English textile workers in the early 1800s. And at that time, there was a technological revolution going on, okay? So all of a sudden, you had these machines that could work far more efficiently than the individuals who used to do this by hand. Change is always painful. All of a sudden, you have these textile workers who have spent lifetimes mastering this skill, who are worried that all that time that they put into the profession is going to go to waste because of these machines. And so they formed this group called the Luddites, and they started destroying this machinery. They started coming in, breaking into these factories, and really just breaking stuff. And factory owners had a really hard time protecting these machines. Now, just historically, if you look at what's going on in England at this time, the wealth of the factory workers, or I'm sorry, the owners, meant that the British government were far more sympathetic to the owners than the workers. And as a response, they actually sent in about 14,000 soldiers into these affected areas where this was taking place, and forced the Luddites, the people who are non-professional individuals, as far as non-professional soldiers, to battle the British Army, one of the greatest armies in the world at the time. And they also attempted to suppress this Luddite activity by infiltrating the group and spying on them. Eventually, the British government handed down very, very severe penalties for destroying textile equipment. The army began to round up the Luddites, transporting large groups of them to either be hanged, it's a capital offense to break this stuff, or taken to Australia to serve punishment in the penal colony. So there's your history lesson for today. Those who oppose technology are named for these guys, the Luddites. Now, this is happening in many industries today. Let me ask another question, because I love just this participation. What other industries are experiencing this type of technological advancement, where we're now getting machines that can take the place of people? Where else are we seeing this today?
Gabrielle says healthcare.
Absolutely.
John says finance. Manufacturing from Sam. Julia says school.
That's great. And it's all over the place. And it's hard to believe. I mean, I love this kind of stuff. A few years ago, there was a big backlash to any machines that were taking the place of employees. There was a big issue with hotel workers afraid to lose jobs, where they had robots that were taking room service to rooms. I even saw a Japanese hotel that was dinosaur themed, and you checked in with this velociraptor, which I don't know how that makes sense, but things may be different in Japan. So automation is happening in these industries. It's happening for sure in finance and manufacturing, has been for decades. Medicine is somewhat new, but there are now machines that can replace some of the work that highly trained individuals are doing, doctors are doing, especially in fields like radiology and anesthesiology. So this is happening. Now, there's less of a backlash today than there was a couple years ago. And the reason for that, at least in the United States, is that workers have their pick of jobs right now. There are so many employers that are looking to fill spots that it's no longer job replacement, right? That we're worried about with these robots. We got to have robots just to get the work done. And so you are seeing businesses such as some fast food restaurants that are mixing the two, right? So you have fewer workers, you have more machines. And that's a good thing in the long run, because machines are taking over the repetitive, boring tasks, and often the tasks that are more dangerous. So it's a good thing overall. This is happening with accounting. It has been for a while with the advent of bookkeeping software. But if you think about it, we don't want to be bookkeepers, right? That's probably the most boring part of accounting. Someone's got to do it, and it's good, and some people like it, but the more interesting aspect of accounting is the bookkeeping. So change is scary. Advances in technology always cause anxiety. I imagine many of you are nervous because of the test and how it's changing. I can tell you faculty have it rough as well. We know that the exam is changing, but we don't have that much information on how it's changing. And we have to prepare students for this new exam that we've never seen. So we'll all be hard pressed to update curriculum to respond to these changes that we don't know about yet. I will say that advances in technology always bring great opportunity, right? We often think about how nervous it makes us and change is bad, right? But it's actually good too. It brings opportunity. Think about how many professional typists lost their jobs as computers and word processors became popular, right? That's short term. It causes a lot of angst. But the invention of the computer has created millions of jobs that weren't there previously. And the accounting industry is really facing a similar dilemma. As a profession, we can't ignore what's going on in the business world. We can't ignore this technology. And I think the AICPA and NASBA are doing a good job of adapting the test to include this technology. However, change is scary, right? I will be the first to say that. It's scary, it's good, but it can be painful. So let's talk about the timeline of these changes. The AICPA and NASBA have been working on this CPA Evolution for a couple of years now, and they are currently working on a blueprint. They've started releasing a little bit of information about what's going to be on the exam. And once the blueprint comes out next year in more detail, we'll have greater detail on what exactly is going to be on the exam. But finally, the new exam is scheduled to launch January 1st, 2024. Will it happen? I hope so, right? But at least that's the plan. Now, most of the audience today is in a perfect position. I believe accountants are going to be more important than ever going forward. And the CPA Evolution is going to highlight the value that you as CPAs can add to businesses. And this timing really couldn't be better. Change is stressful, uncertainty is stressful, but you might be able to avoid the stress by passing the exam as is before it changes and still reap the benefits of the new direction that the CPA Evolution is signaling to employers. I can tell you on a smaller scale, it wasn't as bad as you have it now, but I was in a similar situation when I was graduating with my master's degree and studying for the CPA exam. We knew that they were going to introduce IFRS. They'd talked about it for years and years. Coincidentally, they just dropped IFRS finally from the exam and said it's never going to converge. But they were going to add IFRS to the exam. They had a date, and we weren't sure what it was going to look like. My professors weren't sure really what to teach us because they didn't know what was going to be on the exam, and it was scary. And so the very first part of the exam that I studied for was FAR so that I could get it out of the way before it changed. I still got credit. I figured the employers would think I would know all about IFRS because of the timing of me coming out of school, but I would never have to learn it unless I needed it. You're in the same situation right now, probably. Let's double check. Let's do another poll question, Julie. How many people are going to be affected by the CPA Evolution?
Take a second to tell us if you're not affected at all because you're planning to pass the entire exam before January 2024. Maybe you'll be a transition candidate, so you'll be affected in part, in which case the transition policy that was released a couple months ago applies to you. Maybe you're planning to take the entire exam after it changes, or maybe you're just not sure yet. Let's get a few more votes and then we'll close out this poll. And we do have a couple of questions too that I want to pose to you after we finish our poll.
That's great. Let's do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see what we got here. Thank you for casting your answer. Okay, so about 2/3 are planning to take the exam before it changes. That's great, and that's what we're going to be talking about more next. Everyone else is kind of across the board, but a few transition candidates in there, which
will have some information that'll be helpful for them as well.
Yeah.
Do we have you want to ask a couple questions now, Julie?
Yeah, so we had one question that pertained to a little bit earlier to your presentation. Danae asks, can you change your discipline after initially deciding?
You know, I'm not 100% sure. I believe you can, and it's really only the discipline, right? So if you were to take the one exam and fail it, for instance, I don't think there's anything stopping you from taking another one. The 3 core classes are going to be the same no matter which discipline, but I believe you can choose whichever and even change it. And the important thing, and we can get more information, Julie, if you don't mind making a note. So let's make sure we find out definitively. But the important thing to note is it doesn't matter which discipline you pass. As soon as you pass any discipline, you're a CPA, just like any CPA that takes any discipline, and you can do any job that requires a CPA. So it's not going to limit you in any way to choose one discipline over another. I think, well, we all know that we have different skills.
Because, you know, it is interesting if you took a discipline and didn't pass and changed your mind about maybe wanting to take another discipline, I could see that being a scenario for a lot of folks. So we'll find out the answer to that and follow up with you, Danae. Thank you for asking that. The next question, and I don't know if you have the answer to this. This is from Christian, and he says, as someone from Quebec, Canada, he just wants to confirm, are these changes in Canada as well?
Oh, that I don't know either.
Yeah, well, we are absolutely talking about the changes to the US CPA exam today, but I would, you know, and Christian, we'd be happy to investigate that as well and at least put you in touch with the right source of information for the Canadian CPA exam, because it is a different exam from the US CPA. But I would imagine changes are afoot there as well, but we can't speak with authority.
That's right. But I think you're spot on. If it's not changing now, it will. It's coming down the pipeline. I wouldn't be surprised if it's coming down the pipeline, because several other exams, such as the CMA exam, have looked at this for years and are or have changed to incorporate more technology, especially.
One more question from Jake. Is there CPE related to the various disciplines as an, I guess that would be like as an additional credit, CPE credit?
Yeah, so the way CPE works is after you get a license, you have to maintain that license with continuing education credits, right? And continuing professional credits. And those are very broad as far as what kind of offerings count toward getting that credit. And so absolutely, you're going to see CPE credits in each of these disciplines. Do you have to maintain certain credits based on your discipline? No, because if you're a CPA, you're a CPA and it doesn't matter. There are some states that require ethics CPE credits, but beyond that, you just have to hit a certain number, and they accept a lot. A lot of different things count as CPE credit. So no, yes, there will be CPEs that target certain areas for sure, because there are so many subspecialties within the CPA field that people have preferences for what they want to pursue, but you don't have to pursue specific CPE to correlate with your discipline.
Got it. All right, we'll keep the questions coming. We'll have another chance to answer questions a little later in the presentation.
Awesome. Okay, moving right along then. So many of you noted that you're going to take this exam before 2024, all 4 parts, and you're in a golden spot. This graph will show you a little bit about who will be impacted more than others, right? If you are just starting this year as a freshman, it's going to be very, very tough. It's going to be impossible unless you have 150 credit hours to finish the exam before 2024. And that's okay, right? But this will give you a roadmap of whether this is going to affect you or not. But regardless of when you're going to take the exam, the steps are going to be the same. And they were the same when I went through the process. Many of you have already finished your education. There are a few of you that are still in the process. That's the foundation, right? That's the foundation for taking the exam. There's no way around getting that knowledge necessary to pass the exam. You also are going to have to get an application in to schedule to sit for the exam. remember, as you plan out your next steps to try to pass the exam, that you just keep in mind that the application process can take a couple of months. And there's nothing worse than thinking you're all ready and you're ready to take the exam tomorrow and, oh, I gotta send in an application and schedule. Just know that it takes some lead time. So leave yourself some time for that. Get that rolling so that you can be studying while that's processing. Finally, you're gonna take the 4 parts of the exam, and then there's some paperwork to finish everything up. Now, one really important thing to do as you pursue the CPAs to create a game plan. You've got to have a game plan. And I would recommend a 1-year plan to pass all 4 of the sections. And you might want to add a 6-month buffer. This already has some buffer in it, because you can take all 4 parts in 6 months. So this gives you a little bit of a buffer, but you might even add 6 months so that you're at 18 months. You want to make sure that you plan so you have extra time for a section that's tougher for you, and make sure that you use an exam planner of some sort to organize, make sure that you're on track. I do want to point out one important note. You need to pass all parts of the exam within 18 months. So the day that you pass your first exam, the clock is ticking. You've got 18 months to pass all 4 parts, or they start rolling off and you got to take them again. I can't imagine anything more frustrating than starting over. That's really tough. So just keep that in the back of your mind. As soon as you pass 1 part, clock is ticking. You got to get done. Now, as a professor, I get questions all the time about the CPA exam. I get this one frequently. What order should I take the parts in? There's not one correct order. However, there is some research that says it's best to start with FAR and end with BEC. That said, we're in a very unique position right now, especially I'm speaking to those who are going to be part of that transition period where you're going to start taking the exam and then the exam is going to change. Because the CPA exam changes January 1st, 2024, it might be better for some of you to take BEC and get that out of the way before the new exam starts. And here's why. If you have credit for the BEC part of the exam, you won't have to take one of the discipline exams that are harder. Okay, and so the way this works is there used to be 4 exams, right, that everyone had to take. They've taken these 3, they've scooped out the most difficult parts of these 3 and made discipline exams. So if you get BEC out of the way, you don't have to take any of the disciplines under the new kind of format or regime. You don't have to take any of those disciplines that contains the harder information that was in the old FAR, audit, and reg exam. So if you're in this transition period, it might make the most sense for you to start with BEC, get that out of the way before January 1st, 2024, and then finish up with these after that date. I know that's a little complicated, and it's always going to be when we switch from one set of guidelines to another. But usually it doesn't really matter. Usually I would recommend FAR first, but if you think you might be in this transition period, you may consider starting with BEC. Might save you some pain in the future. Another question I often get is, how much time should I plan to study? The answer is hundreds of hours. Oh, it's just depressing to think about, especially if you've been in school or recently got out of school and you're kind of out of that game. It's miserable. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's miserable. These numbers we have on the screen comes from Wiley data for people who have done well on the exam. This is typically how much time they take. I've seen other estimates that you're going to need at least 80 to 100 hours per exam. Just know it's going to take a long time. It's going to ruin a lot of your weekend plans. So hurry up and finish, pass the exam, get it behind you so you can move on with your life. But you should know it does take a lot of time to study. It's a hard exam. And once you pass the exam, you'll be glad that it's a hard exam, because fewer CPAs means you're in higher demand, right? So it's coming, guys. You're gonna have to study and study hard, and there's really no shortcut to this. It takes time. What types of information can you use to study? A lot of us, I guess you gotta think about how you learn. People learn differently based on just learning styles. A lot of people like the feel of being in a classroom, and so video lectures work really well. Some people learn well just reading information, so study guides are a great option. I highly recommend assessments, practice exams, practice questions, anything that can help you prepare for the format and kind of the flow of the actual exam is very, very helpful. Within the Wiley product, there's a lot of other supplemental materials that are helpful that you'll probably see in other formats as well, including virtual classes, flashcards, deep dives, in-depth questions that are solved for you by professors, and maybe even a last minute, here are the most important things for the exam that you'll do a week or two before the test. So you just have to figure out what works best for you and tackle this exam effectively, right? You got to figure out what works best for you, focus on those things, and make sure you go in feeling prepared. And just how prepared should you be? This depends again on you. I can tell you, I did very well on the CPA exam, right? I scored high, and I had some friends that said, you know what that means? It means you study too hard. And to a certain extent, they're right, because a 95 and a 75 are both passing grades. You don't get a trophy for getting a really high score. You get a CPA just like someone who scores barely over the threshold. But I felt ready to take those exams, and that meant a lot to me. I didn't want to go in there feeling nervous. That said, I actually thought I failed 2 of the parts. It's a tough exam. Just be ready for it. But you need to think about how you want to go into that exam. You want to feel like you're ready for anything, and make sure you spend the time necessary to get there. Some people have test anxiety, right? And if you're one of those people, you're going to need to study more. Some people have other constraints on their time. I can tell you, when I was studying, I had a toddler running around my feet. That made it harder, right? So it probably took longer for me to study than other people. And you just have to consider all of these things when you're making your game plan to figure out how much time you need. But don't ignore it. There's not a one size fits all. It's really dependent on the person. I do want to point out something really neat that Wiley has invested a lot of resources in. This is a new feature they have in their system. It's pretty slick. I'll tell you, it's pretty slick. And it's called the score predictor. And what this does is it looks at people who have passed the exam. It takes a lot of data, and it looks at how well you're doing based on practice problems and practice exams, and then extrapolates how well will you do. And that's really helpful, because you think about all these hours you have to spend on the exam, and you take these practice exams and you have your score. Where should you spend your time? Well, you should spend your time where it's most effective. You should spend your time where you're very weak, and where that extra hour is going to get you far more points than where you're already strong. And so score predictor will tell you, this is where you're doing well, this is where you're not doing well, and this is where you need to spend your time. So I highly recommend something like this as you study, so that you can focus your time on those areas where you're weakest, where you need the most help while you're studying. There's a fair amount of research that has to do with how we digest information. And if you're anything like me, it's tough for me to sit down and study for 4, 6, or 8 hours. It just, your mind turns to mush after a little bit. And so research has found that when you chunk information, right, you put it in bite-sized chunks, it's easier to retain that information. And so I would highly recommend, as you study, break things down into chunks. And I can tell you that the Wiley product does this for you, but you should do this anytime you're studying for a quiz, a test, anything in school. Break things down and study in chunks. There's actually some research on how we categorize information. And much of that work happens when we're asleep, which is another reason why cramming is so, it just doesn't work very well, right? We actually do much better if we can study little bits over a longer period of time, categorize it in our mind, and we'll do far better on an exam. So whenever you're studying, make sure you're not trying to do too much at once. You really need bite-sized lessons. Within, I'm talking a little bit more about Wiley specific product, Wiley CPA. Within the Wiley product, you can customize these lessons. You can include flashcards, the practice problems, the slides, the videos, whatever works for you. You can choose what you do and don't want, because we all learn differently. And I found that to be very helpful for my students. Another great thing about the Wiley CPA product is that often we have a lot of time where we could be working given the right tools. And the mobile app is one of these tools. I know that I have a lot of time while I'm commuting to study, if only I had the ability to look at some content. And so with Wiley CPA, being on a mobile app, if you're on the way to school or work on a train or a bus or subway, you can get one of those chunks out of the way, get one of those lectures out of the way and behind you. And so we have more time than we think we do if we can find ways to access those tools. So CPA, the mobile app is a great way to do that. I do want to tell you a little bit about the exam planner that Wiley uses, and you should be using this or something like this as you study for the exam. You got to have a game plan, and it's far more effective to lay this out sequentially and say, I'm going to do this much every day, than it is to try to tackle it all at once. So with the Wiley exam planner, all you have to do is enter a start date, when you plan to sit for the exam, how much time you have every day, and it will lay out a program for you. This is what you need to do today. This is how many lessons you have to get through this week. And it will even lay it out in a calendar so you can see if you're on time, how well you're doing on these assessments, how far along in the course you are, to make sure that you're on pace to pass that exam when you've signed up for it. Okay. So I can tell you, having seen many of these products, the Wiley CPA product is an excellent product. But I do want to emphasize one point above all else. The CPA license is valuable, and probably more now than ever. And I know many people working in the accounting industry, and probably some of you, who wish they had taken the time to get that CPA license earlier in their careers. I tell you, it's a tough exam. I've harped on that many times in this presentation, but I encourage you to find a product that works well for you to help you get to that finish line. I can tell you that Wiley has a good product. It has several features that make it very, very effective. And you might as well give it a try. Wiley is offering a 2-week free trial. Take advantage of it. See if it works for you. May or may not. But I can tell you, based on my experience, it's a great product and it can help you get where you want to be. My final takeaway is that you can do this. The CPA seems daunting, but you can do this. You can pass the exam. You can join the profession. If you've made it through school, you already know how to master content. This isn't a new skill for you. You simply have to be dedicated enough to get through the exam. I can tell you it's so liberating to see those passing scores come in. It used to come in the mail. I don't know if it comes in the mail anymore, but it feels so good to see that pressure just go away and know that you don't have to worry about that part of the exam anymore. So get the exam behind you, become part of the next generation of CPAs. And then you can start worrying about how to use your expertise to solve the problems that companies are really facing, right? You can move on to bigger and better things. Anyway, I'm around. I'd love to answer any questions we might have. Julie, has anything come up in the last?
We have a couple more questions that have come in, and also, keep them coming. We have about 15 minutes to answer questions. So the first one is from Gabrielle. You talked quite a bit about how BEC is going away and these 3 new disciplines, but she asks, will FAR, ODD, and REG also be changing?
So everything's changing a little bit, right? You have these constant updates, but I don't think the underlying content for those other tests are going to change as much. The big change for those is the addition of technology, as that's going to be integrated with all 3 of those exams. And then the other change will be, it's really the same content from the exam. It's going to expand, but it's going to expand in these discipline areas. And so will there be new content? Yes, I've seen some of the preliminary blueprints, and there's some things on the exam that I've never seen. There's some special, but that's mostly in the discipline areas. And if you're in a good program or you're using a good test prep software, they're going to be ready for it. You're going to be ready for it. I can tell you, Wiley, I've been in on meetings. They've got this huge list of content that they need to cover. They're looking for, they're wrapping up this product, figuring out who's going to work on these new areas. We've got some time, right? We're talking 2024. So if that's your schedule where you're going to have to wait and take part of the exam after January 1st, 2024, I can tell you Wiley's going to be ready, and your schools are going to be ready. You'll have enough of a runway with the blueprint coming out at the beginning of 2023 that I don't think it's something to worry about yet. Now, that said, I think it becomes even more important for us as students to figure out what our strengths and our weaknesses are. Yes, the content's going to be more difficult in the new exam with these discipline areas, but you only have to take one of the three. And I think that's a really big advantage. So if you, whatever discipline you choose, you've got to be an expert in that discipline. But if you're not choosing that discipline, you're okay with just the core information.
Okay, this next question is from Sam. You had that slide that talked about how many hours should you plan to study to pass each part, which, you know, they're big numbers, they're intimidating numbers, but they're realistic. Sam's question is, for those of us who have been out of school for over 10 years, how much time should we plan for?
I think those, I can tell you, I'll tell you this. It's hard to say. It depends, right? I know that's the question the answer everyone hates, but it really does depend. I studied using some test prep software. I went through every single question. I went through every single lecture. I scored really, really well. And I think oftentimes we overlook, you know, I already know a lot. Maybe I don't think I know a lot, but I know more than I thought I knew. I was coming out of a good program. If you have work experience, you already know a fair amount from your work experience, I would imagine. And so I think if you spend the time that was shown on those pages, I think that's pretty realistic. Even if you haven't been in school recently, if you are using that time wisely, if you're using the resources available and approaching it very with purpose, right? Very purposefully, very methodically, you can probably be okay with that time frame, even having been out of school for 10 years.
Okay. This next question is from Lydia, and it's pretty specific, but we'll see if you know the answer. She asks, I'm studying for the CPA and confused about whether IFRS is still tested. I've heard it may not be.
I heard they're dropping it. I don't know when that change goes in effect, but it is, if it hasn't happened already, it's happening very soon, which is exciting because IFRS is, GAAP is confusing enough, right? So to learn a second regime of accounting rules and principles, just no thank you. So I think this will make it easier for test takers, but I don't know what the effective date is on that change. Julie, okay, if we can make a note of that and get that information.
Yeah, Lydia, we'd be happy to investigate that one and follow up with you. This next question is from Michael, and I think I can answer this question in part. Does Wiley give suggestions about how to mix video lessons with practice exams and other questions? I will say the bite-sized lessons in the Wiley CPA review course all start with a video lecture that's about 30 to 45 minutes in length, so it's designed to be fairly quick. Each lesson also has study text, as well as different types of true-false questions and practice questions and flashcards. So one thing you can do, if you know, video lessons aren't absolute if you feel that you need that full review on a particular topic. But if you're not sure and you think you might have some strength in that topic, you can start by taking a diagnostic exam that will tell you how proficient you are in that topic. And if your proficiency is not at a level that it needs to be, then you should absolutely watch that video lesson and read the study text. Kip, would you have anything to add to that?
I totally agree. And that diagnostic test, because it's broken down by topic area, those are so helpful to show you where you need to spend your time, right? We had that other question, how many hours do I need to spend? The diagnostic test will tell you if you need more time or not. And so absolutely, that's a great tool to have. Those video lectures are great. They do a very good job, the instructors in the Wiley program, but you may not need it if you're strong in that area. And the nice thing is you can listen to it on 2 times speed And you do enough of that, and you finish, studying for half a day, and you wonder why everyone's talking so slowly to you.
Right. Okay. Question from RT. This is a great question. How do you have any suggestions about how to prepare for task-based simulations?
The best way to prepare for task-based simulations is to practice task-based simulations. And that is something that the Wiley software has. And you have to, right? Because you never know what to expect. Those are the questions that cause the most anxiety, because it's very easy to sit down and take 20 multiple choice questions, knock those out, and feel like you've done a good job today. It's really tough to go through one of those simulation-based problems. And then when you're done with it, you almost have to self-grade. How close am I, right? Because that's how they're graded. You have graders that go through it, and they have a key, and they're comparing your answer to the key. It's not something that I would like to do when I study, because I like to see that instant, okay, here's my score, I can move on. So unfortunately, the best way to prepare for it is just to practice it, and it's tough, but you want to make sure that you've seen a few of these before you sit down for the exam. And the other thing I will say, it's the nice thing about the Wiley software is it's set up like the exam. So you're not just seeing what type of question it is, you're going to have the same functionality and the same tools that you would have on the exam, so that when you're sitting for the exam, things seem familiar, right? So I don't have to worry about how to approach the software. I can just focus on answering the question.
I just wanted to let everyone know we have a helpful attendee who noted that IFRS was removed in July of 2021, and he shared a link to a Journal of Accountancy article that I've just shared in the question box. So if you're interested in that, go check that out.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness. Question from Anna, and this is kind of a motivational question. If you get really tired of studying, what are some suggestions to keep you going and staying on track?
Oh, I deal with this as I write research papers. Another super boring, something you have to do that takes forever, and it's really tough. And so how do I motivate myself? I like to try to break things down. I'm not trying to be prepared for the exam at the end of the day. I'm trying to get through 3 lessons. So a lot of it is, it's easier to get motivated to do a little thing than a huge thing that feels overwhelming. Personally, I also find exercise in between. When I need a break, go out and get a walk, come back and keep going. And personally, one of the final things I do is find some way to reward yourself for doing this, right? If you get through 10 lessons, you get through an exam, celebrate the win. I know I've got 3 more exams to pass, but if you get through an exam, go out to dinner, do something celebratory, because it's worth celebrating. That's a big accomplishment.
Those are great suggestions. Okay, next question is specific to the Wiley product. Is it possible to pass all the sections only relying on the Wiley study guides and the Wiley test bank? Or do you need the full course?
Oh, I see. So not using the videos.
Right.
Okay. So how do I understand that?
Yeah, and a lot of the tools that you talked about are in the full Wiley CPA review course, like the score predictor, the exam.
So is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Absolutely, it's possible. Is it? It'd certainly be more difficult, because if there's something you don't understand, you don't have the videos that can explain in depth what's going on. But absolutely, if you're the type of person who just soaks it up like a sponge when you're reading, you might not need it. Most people prefer the videos.
Or saving them until last.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to be retaken, but first, or kind of before those other sections, or wait until take those at the end.
I think I missed that question. What was that, Julie?
I think what she's asking is, so she lost credit for those first two tests that were passed. Would it be better to retake those tests at the very beginning of kind of restarting the process, or save them until the end?
I see. I see. I
Yeah.
apologize for misunderstanding that question. What would I do? If I had, it depends on the person again. Personally, if I failed it, or if I lost an exam because I failed a later test, is that the right, am I understanding this right, Julie?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
passed some exams, I failed some exams, and I lost the ones that I passed. And
Yeah, she's saying that she lost the two tests that she already passed just due to time, especially during COVID. Yeah,
oh yeah, it was terrible in COVID.
yeah.
You guys are troopers for trying to do any of this via COVID. That made everything worse. I would knock out the hard ones first. I would save those ones that I passed for last, because the last thing you want to do is have more fall off your 18-month, out of your 18-month window. You know that you can pass those ones you've already passed. You've done it before. So focus your time and attention on those ones that you found are difficult. Get those out of the way.
That's a really solid piece of advice. Okay. Sorry, we got a whole bunch of questions that came in, so I'm just kind of digesting what came in here. This one, is very specific, but it's from RT. Will foreign transactions be tested on FAR? That may not be your area.
Yeah, I'll tell you, my area is I'm doing a lot of the data analytics and technology for parts of the exam. And most of that is going to be in management accounting, the BEC related stuff, some in audit, very little in tax, and very little in the FAR part of the exam. So I'm going to have to tell you, we'll get back to you on that one.
Here's another question that's specific to the Wiley product, and it's kind of from the other way around. Could someone study for the exam using only the Wiley videos and not the supplemental materials such as flashcards? In other words, all the necessary material is all the necessary material to pass the exam contained in the videos? And you kind of answered that in that last question.
So I'd say videos probably do it, but you need to have those practice questions. I think if I had one thing that I would study, or that I would use first, that would be the most useful, it's those practice questions and practice exams. Because if you watch a video and you skip all of the other stuff and you just take the practice questions and you do really well, you're done. You have it. But if you watch the video and something's unclear and you're not scoring well, that's the time when you need to get back to basics and dig into the study guides, maybe go back to your textbooks. You got to find a way to be proficient in every single part of the exam so you can pass it. And whether that means you have to watch videos or I don't care how you get there, right? You use what's best for you, but make sure you're scoring well on those practice quizzes and exams, because that's the best indicator of how well you're going to do on the exam.
Yeah. Okay, I just have to share some great comments from Sam. This is in response to the motivational, how do you keep yourself motivated? He says, I play my bagpipes as a reward, and I don't allow myself to listen to music until I'm done. Those are some, I think something, whatever works for you to kind of keep you motivated.
I'm sure your neighbors love that.
Yeah, I love that you play the bagpipes. I hope you wear a kilt while you do that. Okay. Question from Anna. And we don't hear too much about essays, but she asks, for international students, what is the best way to prepare for the 3 essays that are part of the BEC section?
That is a good question. And those are going away. Well, the BEC's part is going away. So I don't know what that'll look like on the new exam. Essays in general are tough, especially for international students. Your best bet, I guess you need to know how these are being graded. that might help. So whenever you have these types of questions, know that those reviewers, they're not looking to penalize you like the meanest elementary school teacher you've ever had. They have a list of things that they're looking for that they're awarding points for. And so give them a reason to give you points. Hit those most important points in your arguments and in your answer. And they're looking for specific numbers, specific thoughts to give you those points. So I'd say you got to change your approach to essay writing from what you're used to in school, because they're not looking to take off and dock points when you mess up. They're looking for ways they can award points based on your answer.
All right, well, it looks like we are out of time. We have quite a few more questions, which we're going to have to follow up with you directly on. Thank you for posting them to us, and our team will be getting back to you. Thanks so much for the great presentation today, and thank you to everyone who attended.
My pleasure. Good luck, guys. Good luck, everyone.
Have a good evening.